My name is Danielle Mercer. I'm 32 years old, and until one Friday night, 3 months after I proposed to my fiancé, I genuinely believed being dependable was one of the best things a person could be. Apparently, Julian thought it made me pathetic. I make about $85,000 a year as a senior project manager for a mid-sized construction company. It's not private jet money. I'm not posting champagne bottles from Monaco or pretending my Monday morning coffee is part of some luxury lifestyle. But I worked for every dollar. 7 years ago, I started as a site supervisor, making $38,000 a year standing outside in steel-toe boots, while summer heat bounced off unfinished concrete. I watched people with better connections get office jobs before me. So I worked harder. Eventually, I became the person those office people called when their projects started falling apart. By 32, I owned a decent 2-bedroom condo, had savings, and could buy groceries without checking my account balance first. I was proud of that life. Julian used to tell me he was proud of it too. We met 3 years earlier, at a rooftop bar downtown. I'd just gotten promoted, so Finn and a few friends from work dragged me out to celebrate. Julian was there with his friends. 28. Social media coordinator for some trendy wellness brand. Dark hair, beautiful smile, and the kind of confidence that made an entire room feel like it had shifted slightly toward him. He approached me first. Within 5 minutes, I had him laughing. Our first date lasted 3 hours. Our first kiss happened beside his car, and he kissed me before I had enough courage to decide whether I should kiss him. 6 months later, we rented a cabin 2 hours north. No cell service. No obligation. One Friday night, Julian was stretched beside me near the fireplace while I finished a project report on my laptop. He looked over his book at me. "I love how focused you are." I laughed. "That's a romantic way of saying I'm working during vacation." "No, seriously." He rested his head against my shoulder. "You're solid, Danny. You don't need constant attention. You know what you want." Those words stayed with me, mostly because years later I'd learn he secretly hated me for the exact qualities he'd once claimed to love. There were signs. Julian constantly compared us with other couples. Never directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he'd casually mention how Hayden's girlfriend surprised him with expensive concert tickets, or how somebody from work had been taken to a Michelin-starred restaurant. Then there was money. We split plenty of expenses early in the relationship, which I respected. But eventually, the comments started. "I love that you're independent," Julian once told me, "but sometimes it's nice when a woman makes her man feel completely taken care of." I remember staring at him. "So, independent but completely financially taken care of?" He laughed. "You know what I mean." I didn't. Then there was Hayden, Julian's closest friend. That man could plant insecurity in concrete and somehow make it grow. "You two are adorable," he'd say. "But Julian, you're still young. Marriage is forever. There's a whole world out there." Always smiling. Always pretending it wasn't criticism. Still, I loved Julian. So 3 months ago I proposed. I saved 4 months of overtime money. $12,000. Cash. I visited 3 jewelry stores before choosing an elegant ring that looked exactly like something Julian would wear, classic expensive, without screaming for attention. Then I reserved a table at Morello's, the Italian restaurant where we'd had our 3rd date. After appetizers, my hands started shaking. I reached across the table, told him how much the last 3 years meant to me. Then I got down on one knee. People noticed immediately. Phones appeared. Some woman near the bar actually gasped. I opened the box. Julian's entire face lit up. Yes, I hadn't even finished. He pulled me up, kissed me, and everyone applauded. For about 30 seconds, I thought I'd just experienced the happiest moment of my life. Then Julian pulled away. Oh my God. He held his hand beneath the restaurant lighting. "Wait until Hayden sees this." That should have bothered me more than it did. His first instinct wasn't us. It was how the moment looked to everyone else. 3 months later, Julian announced he was going out with Hayden and his usual crew Friday night. Fine by me. Finn came over around 8 with wings, soda, and an Xbox controller. At approximately 10:30, my phone buzzed. "Julian." "Hold on," I told Finn. "Probably needs a ride." I answered. "Hey." Nothing. Just muffled music and voices. "Pocket dial." I was about to disconnect. Then Julian's voice became perfectly clear. The whole thing was pathetic. My thumb froze above the screen. Finn looked over. What? I raised one finger, then put the phone on speaker. Julian continued. She took me to Morello's, the same restaurant we'd already been to. Zero creativity. My stomach tightened. The proposal, someone asked. Exactly. Recycled romance because Danielle doesn't know how to do anything exciting. Finn stared at me. I didn't move. Then Julian started talking about the ring. It's embarrassing. I have to angle my hand in pictures so people don't realize how small it looks. Someone laughed. How much could she have spent? I don't know. 1,500. More laughter. I couldn't breathe properly. $12,000. 4 months of overtime. 60-hour weeks. Cheap lunches eaten at my desk. And my fiancé was laughing about it. Then Hayden's voice came through. You deserve somebody on your level. Julian Sahil. That's what Jenna keeps making me realize. I looked at Finn. Finn quietly reached for her phone and started recording. Jenna, someone asked. From work. She's incredible. Successful. Confident. Drives this gorgeous Audi. She's always talking about investments and traveling. When we have lunch, she doesn't care what anything costs. When we have lunch, present tense. My engagement ring suddenly felt less important. Does she like you? Hayden asked. Pause. Then Julian laughed softly. She's been asking me out for months. Something inside me cracked, and honestly, his next sentence destroyed whatever remained. I'm starting to think I picked the wrong woman, Finn whispered Danny. I shook my head. I needed to hear everything. Danielle's safe. Julian continued. Reliable. Predictable. She's basically a Honda Civic. The table erupted in laughter. But Jenna. Another pause. Jenna's the Porsche. They laughed again. I listened for nearly 25 minutes. 25 minutes of the man I planned to marry, explaining why my career wasn't impressive enough, why our life wasn't glamorous enough, why another woman fascinated him more than I did. Finally, Hayden said, You deserve better. That was when I stopped listening. I opened Messenger and found one of Julian's friends who was sitting at that table. My fingers were strangely steady. Put Julian on speaker. I've got something to say to everyone. Sin. 3 seconds later, the laughter disappeared. Someone gasped. Chairs scraped. Then, a terrified voice came through my phone. Julian. Silence. Danielle just messaged me. Another silence. She can hear us. I closed my eyes. For the first time that night, I smiled. Danielle. Julian sounded completely different now. Small. Danny. Are you there? I waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then I finally answered. Yeah, Julian. Nobody at that table made a sound. I've been here for the last 25 minutes. Oh my God. Baby, listen. No. My voice surprised even me with how calm it sounded. You've already said everything I needed to hear. I was drinking. Hayden and everyone were just... And Jenna. Silence. Was Jenna the alcohol talking too? Danny. It's complicated. No. Actually, you made it incredibly simple. Finn was staring at me, recording everything. I continued. And Julian. What? That tiny, embarrassing ring you've been complaining about. His breathing changed. It cost $12,000. Nobody laughed now. 12. Yeah. I looked around the condo I'd worked years to afford. But don't worry. My voice dropped. You won't have to be embarrassed wearing it much longer. Then I ended the call. My phone immediately started vibrating. Julian. Hayden. Unknown numbers. Texts appearing faster than I could read them. Finn lowered her phone. Danny. I switched mine off. Then I reached for my soda. Send me that recording. Finn studied my face. What are you going to do? I stared at the engagement photo still sitting on the shelf across from us. Julian smiling. Me looking like I'd won the lottery. Tomorrow morning, that photograph would mean something entirely different. I've got some calls to make. I woke up Saturday morning after maybe 4 hours of sleep. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. Sunlight pushed through the blinds. My phone sat face down on the nightstand. Then, I remembered Julian's voice. Danielle's safe. reliable. She's basically a Honda Civic. And Jenna was the Porsche. I expected to feel devastated. Instead, I felt something colder, clarity. When someone spends 25 minutes explaining exactly how little they respect you because they believe you'll never hear it, there's surprisingly little left to discuss. I turned my phone on. 43 missed calls. Most from Julian. 7 from Hayden. Several from numbers I didn't recognize. There were enough messages to write a novel. Baby, please answer. You misunderstood everything. I was drunk. Hayden got everyone worked up. Then, you can't just ignore me. We're getting married. I stared at that one for several seconds. Not anymore. By 9 that morning, I was standing inside my bank. Julian and I had created a joint wedding account containing a little over $14,000. He'd contributed roughly $2,000. Most of the rest had come from me. Overtime. Bonuses. Money I'd saved instead of upgrading my car or taking vacations. I explained that the wedding had been canceled and asked the teller to separate the funds according to our documented contributions. She didn't ask why. Maybe she'd seen that expression before. The look people have when they're dismantling a future they'd already started paying for. 20 minutes later, my portion was safely back in my personal account. My next stop hurt more. The jewelry store. I walked through those glass doors carrying the same little box I'd held when I dropped to one knee at Morello's. The salesman recognized me. His smile disappeared when he saw the box. Things didn't work out. I placed the receipt on the counter. They worked out exactly how they needed to. He didn't ask anything else. The ring was still within the return window I'd specifically checked when purchasing it. 15 minutes later, $12,000 was being processed back to my account. 4 months of overtime. Returned. Just like that. I sat in my car afterward staring through the windshield. That should have been the moment I cried. Instead, I started laughing. Not because anything was funny, because Julian had spent an entire evening humiliating me over a ring worth more than he imagined, while fantasizing about a woman he believed could give him a richer life. And now he had neither. Next came the wedding vendors. Venue. Cancelled. Caterer. Cancelled. Photographer. Cancelled. Thej. Cancelled. There were fees, of course. About $4,000 altogether. The interesting part, Julian had insisted on being the primary contact on most contracts. He wanted creative control. At the time, I'd thought it was cute. Now it meant the cancellation invoices went directly to him. By noon, the wedding we'd spent months planning no longer existed. There was one call I didn't make. Instead, I sent a message to Julian's parents. Jonathan and Elise Carter had treated me like their daughter almost from the beginning. Holidays, birthdays, Sunday dinners, they'd included me in everything. So I attached Finn's recording. Jonathan and Elise, the wedding is canceled. This recording will explain why. I'm sorry you have to hear it this way. Then I waited. 20 minutes later, Jonathan called. Danielle. His voice sounded older. Elise and I just listened to everything. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry. No. He stopped me. You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. Elise was beside him on speaker. We're ashamed, Danielle. Her voice cracked. This isn't how we raised our son. I swallowed hard. Hearing Julian insult me had hurt. Hearing his mother apologize almost made me cry. You've both been wonderful to me. Is there anything we can do? Jonathan asked. I looked around my condo. Julian's shoes near the entryway, his jackets in my closet, his ridiculous collection of skincare products taking over my bathroom. Just help him get his things out by Sunday. We will. After the call ended, I experienced something unexpected. Peace. Not happiness. Not revenge. Just the absence of anxiety. For months, I'd been trying to understand Julian's little comments. Was I successful enough? Romantic enough? Exciting enough? Now I knew. The problem wasn't that I hadn't reached some invisible standard. The standard simply moved every time I reached it. Around 6 that evening, somebody started pounding on my door. I didn't need the peephole. Danielle. Julien. I opened it. He looked terrible. Same clothes from Friday night. Bloodshot eyes. Hair disheveled. Danny, please. No. We need to talk. We really don't. I stepped aside only because I wanted him collecting his belongings immediately. Instead, he marched into the living room. You're throwing away 3 years because of one stupid conversation. I stared at him. I'm not throwing away anything. You canceled everything. You told your friends you were settling for me. I was drunk. You said Jenna was everything I'm not. People vent. For 25 minutes. His face tightened. You weren't supposed to hear that. And there it was. Not I shouldn't have said it. I wasn't supposed to hear it. You know what I said quietly. That's probably the most honest thing you've said since you walked in. He rubbed both hands over his face. Nothing happened with Jenna. Yet. Nothing happened. But you wanted it to. Silence. That answered me. Then my phone rang. Jonathan. Julian saw his father's name. His expression changed instantly. You told my parents. I answered, and put the call on speaker. Danielle. I'm here. We wanted to make sure Julian came to collect his belongings. Julian stepped forward. Dad. Jonathan went silent. Then, Julian. Dad. She completely misunderstood. Don't. I'd never heard Jonathan speak to him that way. We heard the recording. Julian's face drained. Elise's voice came through next. The way you talked about Danielle was disgusting. Mom. She worked herself exhausted buying you that ring. You don't understand. We understand perfectly, Jonathan said. You mocked the woman you were supposed to marry while bragging about another woman. Julian gestured desperately at me to end the call. I didn't. Jonathan continued. You owe Danielle an apology, and then you're going to leave her home. Julian's humiliation transformed into anger the second the call ended. You had no right. No right to what? Involve my family. You involved an entire table of friends in our relationship. That was private. You called me. It was an accident. Exactly. I stepped closer. And accidentally I found out who you are when I'm not in the room. His eyes filled. Danny, please. For half a second I saw the man from the cabin. The man who'd rested against me by the fireplace and told me I was everything he wanted. That memory almost weakened me. Then I remembered the laughter. Honda Civic. Jenna's the Porsche. No. Julian dropped onto my couch. I'm not leaving. I stared at him. What? This is my home too. No, Julian. I live here. My name is on the mortgage. My name is on the utilities. I bought this condo before you moved in. His expression shifted. For the first time, I think he understood exactly how much of his comfortable life existed, because I'd provided it. Around 8, somebody pounded on the door again. This time, it was Hayden, Alyssa, and 2 others from Friday night. Hayden pushed inside. Danielle, you need to calm down. I almost laughed. You came into my home to tell me to calm down. Julian made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. Alyssa looked uncomfortable. Hayden continued. He loves you. Interesting way of showing it. You can't destroy a relationship over some drunken guy talk. Guy talk. I looked around at them. You spent 25 minutes helping my fiancé explain why I'm beneath him. Nobody answered. Then one of the others said, Julian deserves someone willing to fight for him. You're right. Julian looked up. Hope appeared on his face. I nodded. He absolutely deserves someone who believes he's worth fighting for. I paused. I'm just not that woman anymore. His face collapsed. Take him with you. Hayden started gathering Julian's jacket and bag. Then Julian suddenly looked at my left hand. My ring. What? I want the engagement ring. For the first time all day, I genuinely smiled. What ring? His eyes narrowed. The one you gave me. I returned it this morning. Silence. You what? Got the 12,000 back. 12,000. His mouth actually fell open. That ring really cost 12,000. Yep. I watched the realization spread across his face. The ring he'd mocked. The sacrifice he'd dismissed. All because he'd assumed anything coming from me couldn't possibly be impressive. Hayden grabbed his arm. Come on, you don't need her. Julian stared at me. You'll regret this. I opened the door. You'll never find another man like me. I looked him directly in the eyes. That's the goal. Then I closed the door. Sunday morning, Jonathan and Elise arrived with boxes. They packed everything Julian had left behind. Before leaving, Elise hugged me. "We're sorry. You didn't do this." Jonathan squeezed my shoulder. "You'll always be family to us." After they left, my condo felt enormous. Finn arrived around noon, carrying Chinese food and her laptop. She barely made it through the door before saying, "You need to see this." She opened Julian's Instagram. He'd gone nuclear. Cryptic posts about betrayal, manipulation, women who punish men for expressing emotions. Hayden was in the comments talking about toxic femininity and women who couldn't handle successful men. I stared at the screen. "Screenshot everything." Finn grinned. "Already did." For the next 2 weeks, Julian rewrote history online. According to his version, I'd been controlling, emotionally unavailable, threatened by his ambition. He conveniently omitted Jenna. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding my life. Gym before work, books I'd abandoned, freelance consulting at $150 an hour, poker nights with Finn and people from work. Without Julian constantly comparing our life to somebody else's Instagram feed, I suddenly had energy again. Then 2 weeks after the breakup, I received a message from Alyssa. "Danielle, I need to tell you something about Julian and Jenna." I stared at it. A second message arrived. He lied that night. We met the following afternoon near Julian's office. Alyssa looked nervous. "I feel horrible." "About what?" "Friday night. I should have stopped it." "Why didn't you?" She glanced away. "Because Hayden controls that group. If you challenge him, you're next." That didn't surprise me. Then Alyssa leaned closer. "But that's not why I asked you here." "What is?" "Jenna never pursued Julian." I froze. Alyssa continued. "She never took him to expensive restaurants. She never showed him jewelry because she wanted him." My stomach tightened. Then what was happening? Julian was chasing her. I said nothing. "Jenna has a boyfriend, Danielle. They've been together almost 2 years." The world seemed to become strangely quiet. Julian knew. Of course he knew. Alyssa swallowed. He kept showing up near her office, finding reasons to work late when she did. He even started going to the same gym. Jesus. It got worse after you ended things. How much worse? Alyssa pulled out her phone. HR suspended Julian for a week. I stared at her. Why? Because Jenna complained. She turned the screen toward me. There were screenshots. Message. Dozens of them. Julian accusing Jenna of sending mixed signals. Julian asking why she was choosing her boyfriend when they had something real. Julian contacting Jenna's boyfriend directly. Alyssa lowered the phone. "Jenna is considering a restraining order." I sat there trying to process it. Julian hadn't thrown away our relationship for another woman. That would have almost made more sense. He'd thrown it away for a fantasy. A woman who didn't even want him. I looked at Alyssa. "Do you have Jenna's number?" Her eyes widened. "Why?" I thought about Julian sitting at that table Friday night. Jenna's the Porsche. I'm starting to think I picked the wrong woman. Then I smiled. Because I think Jenna and I need to talk. Alyssa didn't give me Jenna's number immediately. She stared at me across the cafe like she was trying to decide whether introducing 2 women connected by Julian Carter was a terrible idea. "What exactly are you planning?" "Nothing illegal." That's not reassuring. Despite everything, I laughed. "I want the truth, Alyssa." "That's it." She hesitated before finally saying, "I'll ask Jenna if she's comfortable talking to you. I'm not giving out her number without permission." Fair enough. 20 minutes after we separated, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hi, Danielle. This is Jenna Reeves. Alyssa explained who you are. I think we should talk." We met the following evening, and within 5 minutes I realized Julian's fantasy version of Jenna had almost nothing to do with the actual woman. Yes, she was successful. Yes, she was confident. And yes, she drove the Audi he'd bragged about. But she wasn't some glamorous predator trying to steal my fiancé. She was exhausted. First, Jenna said after we ordered coffee, "I'm sorry about your engagement. You don't owe me an apology." I know, but hearing that he was telling people we were practically dating. She shook her head. "It's disturbing." "So you never asked him out?" "Never. Never took him to expensive restaurants?" She actually laughed. "Danielle, I barely wanted to sit next to him in the break room." That answered that. "What about the jewelry?" Her expression changed. "What jewelry?" He told his friends you showed him expensive pieces you were considering buying. Jenna stared at me, then slowly covered her mouth. Oh my God. What? I showed people at work an engagement ring. My stomach dropped. For Julian? No. She turned her phone toward me. The lock screen showed Jenna standing beside a tall, dark-haired man. My boyfriend, James. How long? Almost 2 years. She smiled faintly. We've been discussing getting engaged. I showed a few coworkers rings I liked, including Julian. The expensive jewelry he described as evidence Jenna wanted him had actually been evidence she wanted to marry someone else. That wasn't even the worst part. Jenna opened a folder on her phone. Screenshots. Dates. Message. Julian asking whether she was staying late. Julian appearing at restaurants where she had business lunches. Julian repeatedly suggesting drinks. Then messages accusing her of flirting with him. I stopped responding unless it was work-related, Jenna said. Then he started showing up at my gym. You're sure he followed you? I never told him where I worked out. That sent a chill through me. And after our engagement ended, he got worse. She showed me another message. Now we don't have to pretend anymore. Another, Danielle knows about us. There's nothing standing in our way. I read it twice. There was no us, Jenna said. I know. No, Danielle. I need you to understand. I never kissed him. Never went on a date with him. Never told him I wanted him. Her voice hardened. Your fiancé built an entire relationship with me inside his head. Ex-fiancé. But I didn't correct her. Jenna continued. HR already suspended him once. If he contacts me outside work again, I'm filing for a restraining order. I should have walked away. Julian wasn't my problem anymore. But something bothered me. As long as Julian could convince himself that Jenna secretly wanted him, he'd never accept what happened. He'd keep blaming me. Jenna. James. Everyone except himself. So, I looked across the table. What if we give him exactly what he thinks he wants? Jenna raised an eyebrow. Explain. You message him. Absolutely not. Hear me out. I explained the idea. Public location. Witnesses. No threats. No confrontation initiated by us. Jenna would tell Julian she wanted to discuss everything. Then she would let him talk. Let him explain what he believed existed between them. Afterward, James would join them, and Julian would finally hear the truth. While he couldn't rewrite the conversation afterward, Jenna considered it, then smiled. James is going to love this. Thursday night. Murphy's Diner. Finn and I arrived 30 minutes early and took a corner booth. She placed her phone against a napkin dispenser. Recording. Subtle. I learned from the best. Jenna arrived next. James waited nearby. Then Julian walked through the door. 20 minutes late. Of course. He'd dress like this was a date. Dark, fitted shirt, fresh haircut, expensive cologne I could smell from across the room. He slid into Jenna's booth, smiling like he'd already won. I'm glad you finally called. Jenna kept her expression neutral. I thought we should settle things. I knew you'd eventually admit it. My fingers tightened around my coffee cup. Finn whispered, this man is unbelievable. Julian leaned toward Jenna. I've always felt this connection between us. Jenna nodded just enough to keep him talking. Connection. You know what I mean. He reached for her hand. She moved it toward her coffee instead. Danielle never understood me. Hearing my name didn't hurt anymore. That surprised me. She doesn't have ambition, Julian continued. Not real ambition. She's comfortable. I almost laughed. 7 years climbing through a male-dominated construction company apparently wasn't ambition. You and I want more, he told Jenna. Success, travel, experiences. Jenna glanced toward my booth. Just once, then back at him. What about James? Julian's smile tightened. Relationships end. Yours certainly did. Exactly. He mistook her sarcasm for encouragement. I know the timing has been messy, but sometimes you have to take risks for the right person. That was James's cue. He walked through the diner doors, still wearing scrubs beneath his jacket, apparently straight from the hospital. He approached their booth. Hey, babe. Julian froze. Jenna smiled. Perfect timing. James kissed her cheek, then looked across the table. You must be Julian. The transformation was incredible. Julian's confidence vanished. What is he doing here? Jenna's expression hardened. Julian, this is James. My boyfriend. I know who he is. Good. James slid beside her. We've been together almost 2 years, Jenna added. Julian stared between them. But you said… I never said anything. You took me to restaurants. No, Julian. You repeatedly appeared at restaurants where I was meeting clients. You showed me jewelry. Jenna almost smiled. I showed coworkers the engagement ring James and I were considering. James lifted his eyebrows. That's what this is about. Julian's face reddened. You gave me signals. No. You wanted me. No. You were always looking at me. Because you kept appearing everywhere I went. Several diners had started watching. Julian lowered his voice. You led me on. Jenna leaned forward. I asked you repeatedly to stop contacting me outside work. Then she said the sentence that finally shattered his fantasy. I was never interested in you. Julian went completely still, and then he saw me. His eyes widened. Danielle, Finn waved cheerfully. Hey, Jules. Julian shot out of the booth. You. I remained seated. You planned this? No. I took another sip of coffee. You told everyone Jenna wanted you. I thought you deserved the opportunity to prove it. You set me up. How? I gestured toward Jenna. She's right there. Go ahead. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Choose the Porsche. Finn nearly choked on her drink. Julian's face went crimson. James looked confused. Do I want to know? Probably not, Jenna said. Julian turned toward her. You ruined my relationship. Jenna blinked. Excuse me. I left a good woman because of you. That finally made me stand. No, Julian. Every eye in the diner shifted toward me. You didn't leave me for Jenna. I walked closer. You humiliated me because you believed something better was waiting. His jaw tightened. That's different. No. That's exactly what happened. Jenna folded her arms. And for the record, you didn't leave Danielle for me. I never offered you anything. You did. No. You flirted with me. Being polite to a coworker isn't flirting. You laughed at my jokes. Finn called from our booth. Apparently laughter is legally binding now. A few people nearby snickered. That pushed Julian over the edge. He pointed at Jenna. You're acting innocent because he's here. James stood. Careful. Julian ignored him. I'm younger than him. I'm more ambitious. You told me you liked ambitious men. Jenna stared at Julian with almost clinical disbelief. You are having a public meltdown because a woman you've been harassing won't validate a relationship that never existed. She paused. That's not ambition. Her voice became colder. It's obsession. Julian lunged forward. It happened quickly. He reached toward Jenna, whether to grab her arm or something else, and James stepped between them. A chair crashed backward. The manager shouted. Finn stood with her phone still recording. Julian. I backed away. 2 employees rushed over. Julian struggled while shouting. Everybody betrayed me. Then, security arrived from the shopping center next door. They grabbed him by both arms. This is insane, Julian yelled. You planned everything. As they dragged him toward the exit, he found me again. I hope you're happy. I looked at the man I'd almost married. 6 months earlier, I'd imagined growing old beside him. Now security was escorting him from a diner because he couldn't accept that his fantasy girlfriend didn't exist. And strangely, I felt nothing. No heartbreak. No satisfaction. Just certainty. You wanted something better, Julian. I held his gaze. I hope you find it. The doors closed behind him. Finn lowered her phone. That was… Don't say beautiful. I was going to say horrifying. Better. James sat beside Jenna again. You okay? She nodded, then looked at me. Are you… I considered the question. Yeah. And for the first time, I meant it. That night, Finn edited together enough of the confrontation to preserve what happened without needing Julian's version of events. I told her not to post anything identifying. I didn't want internet fame. I wanted evidence. Good decision. Because Julian started texting me before midnight. You humiliated me. You're going to pay for this. Then, maybe I'll come explain everything at your office. Another. Hope you like that car because accidents happen. I screenshot every message, sent copies to Jenna, then backed them up. Jenna replied immediately, "I'm sending these to HR and my attorney." The next morning, Julian was suspended indefinitely. Not because of me. Because Jenna had months of documentation. Because he'd already received warnings. Because his behavior had escalated in public. Hayden immediately began posting vague messages about people weaponizing mental health against men. Then something interesting happened. Nobody joined him. Alyssa had already distanced herself. 2 other friends quietly unfollowed Julian. Even Hayden's comments became less enthusiastic. Julian's support system was disappearing. 3 weeks later, Jonathan texted me, "Danielle, I wanted you to hear this from us rather than online. Julian lost his job. He's moving back home." I stared at the message. Another arrived. Elise and I told him he can stay only if he gets professional help. "We won't participate in blaming you or Jenna." I typed, "I'm sorry you're dealing with this." Jonathan responded, "We are too. But these are his choices." His choices. That mattered. Because for weeks, Julian had told everyone I destroyed his life. But I hadn't made him insult me. I hadn't made him pursue Jenna. I hadn't made him ignore her boundaries. And I certainly hadn't made him threaten me afterward. He had spent years looking for a better life. Now he'd lost his fiancé, his job, most of his friends, and the fantasy woman he'd sacrificed everything to chase. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening to me. I was becoming happier. Not revenge happy. Free. My consulting work was growing. I was sleeping better. The condo felt like mine again. Then, 6 months after that accidental phone call, an unknown number appeared on my screen. I almost ignored it. Until I read the first sentence. "Danielle, it's Julian." I stopped walking. The next message appeared. "I'm in therapy now. I've had a lot of time to think about everything." Then another. "I know I made mistakes." And finally, "I miss you. Can we talk?" For several seconds, I simply stared at those words, because somewhere underneath everything Julian had become was still the man I'd once planned to marry. And for the first time in 6 months, I had to decide whether that version of him deserved an answer. I stared at Julian's message for almost a full minute. "I miss you. Can we talk?" 6 months earlier, those 5 words would have destroyed me. Maybe I would have called immediately. Maybe I would have convinced myself that therapy had changed everything, that losing his job and nearly everyone around him had finally forced him to understand what he'd done. But 6 months is a long time when you're no longer spending every day trying to earn someone's approval. I locked my phone and kept walking. That morning, I was heading into the gym before work. Something I'd started doing after the breakup. At first, it had been an excuse to keep myself busy. Then it became a routine. Then, somehow it became mine. That was the strangest thing about rebuilding my life. There wasn't one dramatic moment where I suddenly became happy again. It happened quietly. One morning I realized I'd slept 8 hours without dreaming about Julian. Another day, I drove past Morello's without feeling sick. Then Finn made a joke about the Honda Civic comment, and instead of wanting to cry, I laughed so hard I nearly spit out my drink. Eventually, Julian stopped being the center of the story. I became the center again. My consulting work had grown faster than expected. What started as one small side project turned into several companies, asking me to review schedules, budgets, and construction plans. $150 an hour. Some weeks I had to turn clients down, because my regular job was still demanding. My boss even pulled me aside one afternoon. "Whatever you've been doing lately, keep doing it." "What do you mean?" "You're sharper." I smiled. "I've got more free time." He laughed. "That'll do it." He didn't know the half of it. For years, Julian had convinced me that our weekends needed to revolve around brunches, trendy restaurants, parties, photo opportunities, and people I didn't particularly like. Without that noise, my life felt enormous. Finn and I expanded our poker nights. Mike joined regularly. So did Torres, and several people from work. Sometimes we played cards. Sometimes nobody touched the cards, because we spent 4 hours arguing about football investments, construction disasters, or which fast food restaurant had the best fries. Nobody cared whether the evening looked impressive online. Nobody photographed their dinner. Nobody compared what we were doing with somebody else's life. It was incredibly boring. And I loved every second of it. Then there was the $12,000. The ring money. For several months, I left it untouched. Every time I saw that number in my savings account, I remembered Julian laughing. I've seen bigger stones at the mall. I could have invested it, probably should have. Instead, one Saturday, Finn and I drove past a dealership, and there it was. A used 2020 Corvette Stingray. Low mileage. Beautiful condition. Finn looked at the car, then at me, then back at the car. No. I smiled. What? Absolutely not. What are you talking about? You're thinking about buying that thing. I wasn't. You have the exact face you had before canceling your wedding. What face? I've already decided, and I'm pretending this is still a discussion face. We took it for a test drive. That was the end of the discussion. I used the returned ring money toward the purchase. Was it financially perfect? Probably not. Did I care? Also probably not. The first time I pulled into Finn's driveway, she came outside laughing. Please tell me you understand how ridiculous this is. What? Julian called you a Honda Civic. I revved the engine. Finn doubled over. Okay. That's objectively hilarious. It was. But the Corvette wasn't about Julian. Not really. It was something I wanted. That distinction mattered. For years, I'd spent money trying to prove my love. Now, I'd spent some on myself without asking whether somebody else considered it impressive. I dated occasionally, too. Nothing serious. A dinner here. Coffee there. One guy spent 20 minutes explaining cryptocurrency to me after I'd specifically told him I wasn't interested. There was no second date. Another asked how much my condo was worth within 15 minutes. Also, no second date. But dating felt different now. I wasn't auditioning. If someone didn't like my schedule, career, car, friends, or lifestyle, fine. There were billions of people on Earth. I no longer needed to convince one of them that I was enough. Which brought me back to Julian's message. That evening, I finally opened it again. There were more messages. I know I don't deserve an answer. Then, therapy has made me realize how much of what happened came from my insecurity. That one made me pause. At least it was more self-aware than anything he'd said before. Another appeared. I was constantly comparing our relationship to other people's lives because I didn't know how to appreciate what I had. Then, I know saying sorry doesn't fix it. And finally, but if there's any part of you that remembers who we were before everything went wrong, I'd like the chance to apologize properly. I sat alone on my couch. The same couch he'd refused to leave 6 months earlier. For a moment, memories returned. The rooftop bar, his laugh, our first date, the cabin, his head against my shoulder while the fireplace crackled. The restaurant, me on one knee, Julian saying yes before I finished asking. Those moments hadn't been fake. That was important to admit. People sometimes want betrayal to rewrite every good memory. It doesn't. I loved Julian. And for some portion of our relationship, I believe he loved me. But love isn't a magical substance that makes everything else irrelevant. You can love someone and still disrespect them. You can love someone and still resent them. You can love someone and still destroy their trust. And sometimes, love isn't enough reason to reopen a door you finally managed to close. So I screenshot Julian's messages. Sent them to Finn. My caption was simple. And there it is. She replied less than 30 seconds later. Please tell me you are not answering. I typed, relax. Then, I'm blocking him. 3 dots appeared. Proud of you. I stared at that message. Then blocked Julian's number. No speech. No final confrontation. No paragraph explaining everything he'd done. He already knew. Or someday he would. Either way, understanding it wasn't my responsibility anymore. A week later, I ran into Alyssa downtown. She told me Julian was still living with his parent. Therapy apparently wasn't optional if he wanted to stay there. Jonathan and Elise had drawn firm boundaries. Hayden had mostly disappeared. Apparently, supporting Julian had been easier when the drama was entertaining. Once Julian lost his job and actually needed someone, Hayden suddenly became really busy. That didn't surprise me. Jenna and James were doing well. Julian had finally stopped contacting her after legal warnings became serious. A few months later, I heard through Alyssa that James had proposed. Jenna said yes. When I heard that, I laughed. Not bitterly, just at the absurdity of it all. The engagement ring Julian once convinced himself Jenna was showing him as some secret romantic signal had been exactly what she'd said it was. A woman looking forward to marrying the man she actually loved. There was no hidden affair. No glamorous woman waiting to rescue Julian from his boring fiancé. No Portia. Just a fantasy he'd built because reality didn't flatter his ego enough. Sometimes people ask whether I regret what happened afterward. Whether canceling everything immediately was too harsh. Whether involving his parents crossed a line. Whether I should have agreed to counseling before ending 3 years together. Maybe another person would have handled it differently. That's fine. But here's what I always come back to. I didn't end our relationship because Julian criticized a restaurant. I didn't end it because he wanted a bigger ring. I didn't even end it because he found another woman attractive. People are human. Attraction happens. I ended it because I heard how my fiancé described me when he believed I wasn't listening. There was contempt in his voice. Not frustration. Not confusion. Contempt. He wasn't telling his friends Danielle and I are struggling. He was entertaining them with my inadequacies. My career became a joke. My lifestyle became a joke. My proposal became a joke. The $12,000 ring I'd worked overtime to buy became a joke. And while everyone laughed, Julian positioned another woman as the reward he deserved for escaping me. That was the part I could never forget. I spent years thinking being dependable made me valuable. Julian convinced himself dependable meant boring. He wanted excitement. He wanted status. He wanted someone better. So I gave him exactly what he asked for: freedom. He was free to chase Jenna, free to impress Hayden, free to find the glamorous life he believed I'd been preventing him from having. And once I stepped aside, something became painfully obvious. I had never been holding Julian back. I'd been holding him up. The condo, the wedding savings, the stability, the emotional support, the future we'd been building. When I removed myself, none of those things followed him, because they weren't his life. They were ours. And far more of ours had been coming from me than I'd realized. 6 months after that accidental call, I drove home from work one evening with the windows down. The sun was setting behind the buildings, turning the sky orange. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked happy, not dramatically transformed. Not like some revenge movie heroine who'd conquered the world, just peaceful. And suddenly, I remembered Julian's comparison. Honda Civic, Porsche. I laughed, because he'd gotten the entire metaphor wrong. Relationships aren't cars. People aren't upgrades. And love isn't supposed to feel like you're constantly sitting in a showroom wondering whether the person beside you is checking the price tag on something better. The light turned green. I accelerated. For the first time in years, I wasn't wondering whether my life looked successful enough to someone else. It felt successful to me. That was enough. Julian once told his friends he'd settled for me. For months afterward, I thought that sentence was the cruelest thing I'd ever heard. Eventually, I understood something. He hadn't settled. I had. I'd settled for being compared. For subtle insults disguised as jokes. For moving goalposts. For constantly proving that the life I'd worked so hard to build deserved respect. And once I stopped, everything changed. Julian wanted someone better. I wanted something simpler. Someone who didn't need an audience to appreciate me. Someone who could look at a quiet Friday night and see peace instead of failure. Someone who understood that loyalty isn't boring. Stability isn't weakness. And being dependable isn't the same thing as being ordinary. Maybe I'll find that person. Maybe I won't. Either way, I'm no longer terrified of being alone. Because being alone turned out to be infinitely better than lying beside someone who secretly believed I wasn't enough. Julian showed me who he was because of an accidental phone call. I listened. That was his mistake. But believing him? That was the best decision I ever made. He wanted the freedom to find someone better, so I gave it to him. And somewhere between returning that ring, canceling that wedding, reclaiming my home, and rebuilding my life, I finally realized the person who deserved better had been me all along.